Hey, black cut.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Heartland Mamas. I'm Murray Briel.
And I'm Heidi Henry coming to you from two socially distant studios at the edge of the Great Red Divide, where every Tuesday and Thursday, usually at 3 p.m., today we're a little late and we'll tell you about that in a minute, we bring you the progressive news and views that you can use to help form the opinions that we have. No, to help you guide you through your day because progressive news is not out there a lot. So Marie and I do our best to bring it to you. You can find all of our previous works at Heartland Mamas, MAMAS.com, on all podcast platforms, YouTube, and proudly part of the Demcast USA network. And today is kind of a part two of the discussion we started last week about Derek Chauvin, George Floyd, the BLM in 2021, and racial injustice and inequality. And it's also 420, which is a super important day to Murray.
This
And
is a
I
very
want,
important day. So, before we get into the meat and potatoes as we sit here and await the verdict, we know that the jury is back and it will be read between 3:30 and 4. So, we're excited we will be on when it is read.
it's a big deal, Murray.
But
The
I
world is
gotta
suddenly
say,
spread.
my shirt says it all. 420. So, hats off to all my cannabis consuming friends, viewers, everyone who understands the good importance of cannabis and enjoy it because we're all going to need a lot of cannabis to get through this verdict that we are expecting to come in, right, Heidi?
Oh, Murray, I should have wore the Taco Tuesday shirt because I'm not an imbiber in cannabis, although I totally believe in it. I think everybody who wants to have it should have it. My husband's a medical user, and it's helped him tremendously with chronic pain from multiple back surgeries. I I'm like all in on cannabis. Whatever you want to do, do it, do it, do it. But today's also Taco Tuesday, and it's the day that we've all been training for. 420 and Taco
Taco
Tuesday.
Tuesday. It is
Just
kind of an
saying.
epic day, and it is
It is.
also the day that we find out whether our justice system works or not,
Oh
and how
God, Murray.
deeply embedded our racial biases are. It's going to really become glaringly apparent in the next 45 minutes as we await the verdict.
It's it's not even a barometer on where we're at as far as injustice and racial inequality. God, we know that we have those things. We know that we were founded on those things, Murray. What we don't know is do we have what it takes to do the right thing? You and I talked in pre-show. I don't think there's anybody that went into the beginning of this trial without a cut and dried um, thought on guilty or innocent. It was just which of the three charges was he going to be found guilty on, or was he going to be acquitted? So let's go over the charges because it's really important, and we're going to find out in just a few minutes what charge it is. Is it second degree murder, which is unintentional murder? Is it third degree murder, which is he acted in a manner that caused the murder? Or is it third or second degree manslaughter, which is culpable negligence? He can be found guilty of one of those three things, or he can be acquitted. And you and I watched the closing arguments yesterday, and trying to find uh, uh, any depth to the bottomless pit that was his defense was so difficult. It was painful to watch, where they tried to make the victim the reason for the murder. And I, victim blaming, victim shaming has
And
gone
that
on.
all, and oh my God, the entire premise of his argument was implicit bias. Everything the defense did
Yep,
relied on the jury's implicit bias.
bias,
You know,
right.
everything from connotations to it was all very carefully crafted. You know, he
Yep.
was afraid of the bystanders that were nearby. There were
No,
six of them who were all tiny, and it was a multiracial group. But of course, you know, that's why we're expecting the Republicans in and the police forces are expecting these mad riots because we those people project that on to others. We riot, we protest, we complain, we ask for an answer, but we're not the ones typically shooting people, killing people, attacking people for race. That's not us. So, the reason that I get so concerned is I think that narrative is so embedded, right? Even saying, criticizing Maxine Waters. So let's talk Maxine Waters for a second, right?
Oh my gosh. There's nothing Maxine Waters said that should change or cause the acquittal for however this verdict comes down. Maxine Waters said what every activist, every person of any conscience has said for decades, since the civil rights era, since the Civil War.
Yes, Maxine Waters said nothing that we haven't been saying for 200 years. And here's the sad part, that we still have to keep saying it.
Say it louder. Say
What
it louder. That's what she said. Say it louder. Be persistent. Oh my God, as an activist, I have said that on so many occasions. I have performed that. I have done that. And Murray, if we can't be heard now for racial justice and equality, if we cannot be heard now, when? How many children, 13-year-olds, do we need to see with their hands in the air shot and killed before we
and
say
that goes
enough?
to the whole system. As we wait for this, we have to remember. Okay, we were just talking about Maxine Waters, and I want to be able to for folks to see exactly what she said. She told reporters in
Right.
Minnesota, in a Minnesota suburb, that recently experienced, as we all know, another black man killed for no reason. That if the jury didn't find Chauvin guilty of murder, we've got to stay on the street. We've got to get more active. We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know that we mean business. And every activist has said something like this, like you just said. So the judge said, as the defense is trying to come up with reasons for a mistrial and his objections, so
They
he
asked
can lay
for
the
a
groundwork
mistrial
for an
over that.
appeal,
They
right?
asked for a Maxine Waters mistrial yesterday.
Yeah,
Listening
that's
to him
it during, exactly, yeah.
regurgitate that, I'm like, are you kidding me?
And that
She says what we
alone,
all say. Go
that
to an individual meeting. You'll hear it,
that alone, Heidi, is
Yeah.
so implicit bias, because he's assuming she means the black people will rise up, that the brown people will rise up, that they will be out there creating problems and burning things down, again, worrying about things, rather than the freaking 150 shootings we've had since the beginning of this year, mass
Wait.
shootings.
Not just 150 shootings, Marie. 150 mass shootings.
You want to
and
define that
it's
for me,
420.
Heidi?
Yeah, mass shootings, Marie, is when 4 or more people are wounded, killed, including the gunman. And we've had 150 of these since 1/1/21. In today's 4/20/21.
So we just talked
150.
about the implicit bias that attorney was saying, right? We just talked about that and how it could corrupt the jury. And the judge said, well, if you are granted a mistrial, Representative Waters may have a part in that. But that's what the media jumped on. They were like, the judge said, but if you listen to the whole statement, again, taking things out of context to fit this narrative
Right.
that this tiny minority has, is insane to me. Because what he said at the end was, he said, oh, it was almost like that was his response, and then he thought about it after and was like, listen, I sincerely doubt that anyone would believe that they had been intimidated by a politician or what they had to say.
Well,
so I don't
like
think that that's even a
ancient.
real argument.
Yeah.
But he did slap down the defense attorney at the end of that, and we don't. And the media isn't talking about that. They're latching on to the narrative that
Of course.
that the black
That he might get
person
off.
will rise.
Murray, I've heard so many they, air quote, they are going to burn the place down. They are going to, if this doesn't go right, Who is they? Are you talking about me? Because if the verdict doesn't go in a humane and right and just manner, there's going to be a lot of theys, pointing at myself, out there making sure that we're heard, saying
And
it louder.
and
And
you
I'm
know,
not threatening
Heidi,
violence. I'm saying to be present in the moment. In Maxine Waters was very clear in her king-like statement of anti-violence resistance, of presence, of being present. She was
of making
extremely
them
clear.
hear our voices heard
Right.
through boycotting companies like they did in Atlanta. And any reasonable, which brings us back to the defense, reasonable officer, because it's defined reasonable in the book. Bullshit, it wasn't reasonable. Those actions weren't reasonable. Even that is epic gaslighting and playing on a narrative.
It,
It was all,
epic.
the entire defense was racial. It was
It was
all just repugnant.
well in Murray, I told you that it occurred to me today when I was taking notes for this. This is kind of a part two show because we did this last week as well. But it is the biggest story of our time right now. Right now, in except for COVID, except for climate change, racial inequality is the touchstone, the cornerstone of a future for the United States. Unless we can get this straight, unless we can figure this out, unless we can make amends for what we've done in mercantilism, we've talked about that, founded on the enslavement of other people, of the stealing of land, of the stealing of riches and bringing them back to Europe. Unless we can make amends for that, unless we can restructure how we go forward from here, we are bound to repeat this over and over again to
And
the
it
point of
begins, like you said, Heidi, we have to address our real history. We have to make amends. We have to
quit
show
whitewashing it,
representation everywhere.
quit
And white
whitewashing
people
it.
can't be afraid that they will lose something. And white people, you're being brainwashed. Okay, let me break this down for you. White people, you're being brainwashed
Right.
because everything that you have heard in your life equates patriotism with whiteness.
Yes.
Everything from our founders to our contributors to our laws to our medical
Policing.
community, everything is based in this white is right mentality. And you take that and you don't
Might is right.
educate people,
Might is right.
and you
Yep.
don't educate people, and people aren't exposed to other people. And at every level we talk about how disarming and awful it is for being a marginalized person, right, to function in that world. Well, all the white people out there, not all but quite a few of you, are being brainwashed by those same people. They
Right.
are using what they use for fear and intimidation for our family of color, and they're using that on you. You're reacting to fear, just not in the same
Well,
way that people of color are.
and I told you, Murray, that this fear is because it's because white people, not all of us, but a significant portion, especially of white males, think that if we don't bully, if we don't hem in, if we don't harm, possess, imprison, murder people of color, it will be white people next. And there's another section of that fear that thinks that those people of color are going to do that to white people. And we talked about this a little bit, totally out of context. But when
But
George Bush,
everything we have been told in
yes,
history is that. Think about it. We just said lack of exposure, lack of understanding, and believing these myths. We have patriotized capitalism and racism, and it equates with the two. That is all there is to it. I mean, even our policing system, we've talked about this, right? That our police system was designed and by functioned after slave patrols And the idea is to, this is what we talked about last week, is to find wrongdoing as opposed to being a peacekeeper, which many other civilized societies have. So automatically you have this heightened state that my job is to find someone doing something wrong. Look at the kids in New York.
Mm-hmm.
For,
Marie,
oh,
yeah, go ahead.
go.
No, they're just starting the coverage right now to release the verdict, and what we'll do is at that time I'll just put it on when they're ready to release the verdict. I'll just put it on the speaker so you can hear it from ABC News, even though it's not our originating broadcast. We're going to just let it play, and credit to ABC News for this. So, and I tried to use a very general news source instead of a cable news source.
Right. Yeah.
So usually my go-to is WGN out of Chicago because they're pretty benign. But Murray, yeah, we have been schooled and trained and made to know. And my father grew up in rural Illinois, and he was taught at his bedside that to praise being a white Anglo-Saxon Christian, and we're hearing that rhetoric now come out of Marjorie Taylor Greene, that the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Christian is the way to be. It is something to be proud of and exclusive of everything else.
Wait,
And
did you add male in there? I'm sorry. Did you put male in there? Because
oh,
you know that white Anglo-Saxon Protestant women are not viewed in the same way. So
no,
you
they're
got to
not.
make sure you put men in there, hon. Not
Yeah,
that we hate men. I'm raising 3 little men. I have a husband. I love men. That's not the issue. The issue is everything in our society, from
yeah.
our justice system to our education, our medical care. It was only
Mm-hmm.
been in the last 20 years that women were even being considered in cancer treatments to see how drugs worked on our bodies.
Murray,
Not to
I told
mention,
you.
there are still doctors out there that feel people of color don't feel pain. And if you think that all of those things don't play on top of each other, you're nuts.
Well, so many things. I mean, much of our understanding of women's reproductive history comes from men that brutalized black women. Um,
Look at psychiatry. Every aspect. I want all of our listeners to think about this just for a minute. White, black, brown, indigenous, yellow, purple, whoever you are, whatever faith you are, just think for 1 second.
yeah.
Everything we know, everything as a United States that we are supposed that we are told is based on manipulation and a lie. And we need to
And
understand that. That's how we stop
and
racism.
we're at the precipice, Murray, where we can choose to go forward on a path of equality and justice and liberty for all, like our Constitution says, even though they didn't mean women or anybody that
Or,
wasn't a white man.
right, with a white
Or we
landowning
can
man.
stay in this, yeah, we can stay in this horrible, horrible place that we're at right now. A constant boiling pot that's ready to boil over at any moment because we didn't address racism during at the close of the Civil War. We let it go under Reconstruction. We let it go when we allowed Jim Crow. We let it go when we allowed redlining. We
We
let it
can't let
go.
it go again.
No, we can't. We just cannot let it go any longer. And this is how
And it
we
needs all
get.
of us. It needs white people especially to understand that,
It's our
to
privilege to
challenge
fix
your
the problems we
minds,
caused.
to think outside of your own cognitive framework, right? Because I guess, I think about these things, but not everyone thinks that everything in their world was designed for, or most things were designed for or by a white European male. And when
Right.
you think about it that way, it opens your mind a little bit. Even my white dudes, think about it in that perspective, and you can start to challenge those biases.
Exactly, Murray. And if we don't challenge them, if we don't push past this point, there will be more of this. There will be more of this. I don't see, even depending on how the verdict goes, I don't see it changing anytime soon. You and I shared with you today a host of videos where white armed drivers were violent and aggressive and nasty and resistant to white police officers and were allowed to drive away unscathed. We watched
Stop
a
right
video.
there. Right there,
Yeah.
Heidi. That. Look at the just it everything. Kyle Rittenhouse, the insurrection. It is all a very different reality than what the narrative you are hearing is. And when we get this verdict, which should be coming any minute,
Yeah.
I want to say that my concern is not about taking to the streets if it goes the way we don't think it should. But my
Yeah.
concern is how the other side is going to react. Think about law enforcement. So if law enforcement thinks if it's a positive verdict, they think they can get away with more. If it's a negative verdict, it's an all out war. We know the Oath Keepers, we know the Peacekeepers. We've done shows on CESPO. And all of those organizations call for patriotism, which equates with nationalism and racism. And we've talked, 1/3 of our military has been infected with or is in some sort of right wing ideology or group.
Yeah. Yeah, Murray, the QAnon held a Back the Blue rally in LaSalle, Illinois, Sunday, which is just a membership drive for them. And all of that is, it sounds really good to back the police, but that's not what those are all about. That's not what those are all about. They're about tinfoil hat conspiracy, flat earth, nationalism, anti-vax, whatever. Bullshit. There's no other way to
And
put it. It's just bullshit.
patriotism has been hijacked by it.
Yeah.
And that leads to this Christian evangelical superiority complex that we've talked about before.
Yep. The white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male shall rise again is what this is all about. That's what that rally out in LaSalle, Illinois was all about. It was about protecting male white dominance. Period. It was not anything about the police, although they do have 2 officers on the police force that are active members of the QAnon, and that's a very well-known fact. It's been in the papers. It's been on the radio
And
locally.
Heidi, you and I know for a fact that over over 1/4 of the sheriffs in the United States
Yeah.
or deputies are affiliated with the Constitutional Sheriff's Organization. And when you look at it, it's to support law enforcement, but it is run and directed and programmed at creating white supremacist patriots that will then be their army. So
No.
I am afraid that if I'm afraid of violence from the right, whether it is the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers, or whether it is police who and military, we've seen it happen.
We have I when I ran for office, I ran in 7 counties, okay? You ran in much more. I know in those 7 counties, we have just in those 7, we have C-SPA, and we have people who believe in FAIR, which is a very unfair type of immigration group, and are active members of that. And these are people that police my area every day. They influence the hires. They influence what they're going to enforce. They influence what they're not going to enforce. They influence everything, and they take your tax dollars to do it. So, just letting you know, it's alarming. There's nobody that they have to answer to. So, in not answering to that, they can do whatever they want. They are law unto themselves. And then you have vigilantes like Kyle Rittenhouse that come out and decide they're going to murder people in the streets. It had nothing to do with anything. And instead of holding him accountable, they put on trial instead the people he murdered.
Exactly. Again, feeding this false narrative, feeding why the prosecution, if we weren't racist, if we weren't a racist nation, and those in power didn't know how well that racism works, the prosecuting attorney would have never made the whole case about George Floyd being black and playing on those implicit biases and those fears.
Well, they made it about him being black. They made it about him being a drug addict. They made him about being unemployed. They made it about being poor. They made it about him having a relationship with a white woman. I mean, what other stereotype can you bring up, Murray?
Every
His heart was too
single
small.
one
His
that
heart was too
plays
big.
into
So they
the
brought the
false
drink factor
narrative
in.
that society is given, he used and he played on the jury with each and every one of those, hoping one of those internal biases
Yes.
would be enough.
Yeah. I told you one of
That's
my favorite books is
despicable. And those are the
Yeah.
people, guys, who are in your sheriff roles, who are in your city councils. If you've got mine, Mayor
School
Larper put out an order putting the Joliet police on high alert. Wonder if it's like last year when they did the same thing and nothing happened, or is it like the time before where the mayor jumped out and beat the hell out of 2 kids? Yeah, makes you wonder.
Murray, the state's attorney for the city of Morris, or the Grundy County, Illinois, asked armed vigilantes to take to the streets of Morris, Illinois to protect the businesses because a bunch of high school kids wanted to have a BLM gathering. A bunch of white high school kids in Morris, Illinois wanted to have a gathering honoring George Floyd right after he died. And the state's attorney for Grundy County, Illinois, called for armed bubbas, hairy bubbas, to come in and march the streets. And he was reelected. So
Yeah.
there's tolerance for this, and there's precedence for this,
And
it's not going to go away.
And it's because of the brainwashing that occurs. I have to hope that humanity, if they weren't brainwashed, because you look at other cultures and you look at other civilizations, other societies, and maybe it's just an inherently human flaw, or maybe it's something that we could address. But this trial shows everything in glaring accuracy about what's
Marie,
wrong.
Yeah, we've talked about the 150 mass shootings that have transpired since the beginning of the year. And in many cases, in some, like 1 or 2 cases, the people weren't white, but the first thing they do is glom onto the ones that weren't white and call it mental illness for all the white people.
Okay, Heidi, I have to point this out. So, viewers,
Okay.
I did this little data thought experiment thing, and it turns out I kept noticing over and over that whenever there would be a shooting or a crime, robbery, burglary, whatever, they always describe the assailant or the perpetrator or the accused by their race, unless it is white. And that shows 2 things. One, it is assumed that white people don't do things wrong, or that white is the normative. It's assumed that white is the normative and everything else is defective. But it is so implicit that they don't bother to say it, yet we all know the minute you see an article, the minute you hear a news report, the minute you see a tweet, it comes out and look at the last guy who just shot everybody up, like 6 hours ago? It was a man, a 30-year-old man, walked into a store. And if it was a black man, if it was a Latinx man, a Latino man, if it was a Asian Pacific man, they would have pointed that out right away. Why?
I don't know, Murray. I just think about the kid in Indianapolis that walked into a FedEx facility that he had really nothing to do with and murdered a whole bunch of people with guns he wasn't supposed to have under the Indiana red flag laws. But he purchased 2 assault weapons legally. And he went in and killed people just like he told other people he was going to. And nobody stopped him because he was a white kid.
Kyle Rittenhouse shot
But
people. He
yeah,
got home. He got to turn himself in. The
yeah,
cops took him for a snack on the way to jail. He got released, was found in violation of his parole at a white
yep,
supremacy group, went back in front of the judge, got another
yep.
release, and was hanging
Another
out in a bar with biker white
white,
supremacists.
yeah.
So don't tell me there isn't a different standard. 5 teenagers in outside of New York in a suburb were riding their bikes. Someone called to complain. A police officer came up. 5 police officers approached 5 kids on bikes and confiscated the kids' bikes. Why? Would they have done that to white
Why?
kids? The whole reason is you don't have a license. You're operating on. Why do we pull people over for 5 miles an hour over the speed limit? Why does anyone get arrested for or given a ticket for jaywalking or
Why was a medic in the National Guard pulled over and pepper sprayed because he had dark tinted windows in a newer SUV? Why?
Exactly.
Why?
It's between the racial bias, the implicit bias, and the people that are drawn to this. And I think when the system changes, we'll be able to move forward. But like you were talking about in the beginning of the show, Heidi, it has to change everywhere.
It has to change. And I think we have to acknowledge the fact that change is hard. Change is really hard. But what we're doing is not working. So we're going to have to change. In order for things to change, we have to change. In order for things to get better, we have to get better. We have to do better things. We have to do more and be more. And I really am disturbed by the fact, because I still have some trolls that crawl through my social media, my personal social media page to challenge me on my ideology of all people are created equal under God. And I know you hate the under God part, but to me, they are all created equally under God. It's man that makes the divisions, that divides us and conquers us, right? It's a divide and conquer strategy that has worked since time immemorial. And are we going to evolve as a human species? Or
Not
are we
with
going to
not with the
devolve?
tiny minority of mercantilist white Christian hetero males at the helm, or not by still doing the same things we've always done. If we don't make systemic change right now, we will never be able to. And for those white people out there, just think it's just because that's the way it's always been doesn't mean that's the way it has to be. There are better ways, and we need to consider those.
It is really important that we consider those things. It's really important that we embrace those things. It's really important that we do those things. It's really important that we understand that the divisions that we have by race, sex, class, orientation are put there by mostly white men.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. The division that you face, the fear of this stupid myth of the black man attacking the white woman, or the cannabis, even down to cannabis on 420
oh,
day.
cannabis was
It's
totally
these
racial.
myths,
Totally,
right? And
totally.
exactly, and all of that plays in. So just remember to challenge those. The way it was doesn't isn't the way it has to be.
Marie, to the control end of things. I've sent you a bunch of stuff recently on all the anti-trans bills that are out there right now. And it's just control. It's only control. It has no benefit to anyone whatsoever. It's just a control issue because these certain group of society are so afraid of losing that control that they find other things to glom onto.
And they
So
and
now
they
it's
they
much
encourage that fear. That's what we're talking
yeah.
about. They instill that fear in you, even if you're not marginalized. They plant these, they're like a really good advertising firm, okay? They plant these ideas in your mind from the time you're in school, no tinfoil hats, and then they reinforce that with everything they do. And please challenge that.
You know, I see that the only thing that's going to happen from these anti-trans bills, and we went through this with the bathroom bill, the only thing that's going to happen is trans kids are going to get hurt. And trans kids have such a high incidence of suicide. And we're going to cover this on another day. But it is control, it is fear, and
Lack of information, brainwashing.
well,
We
yeah,
brainwash
but
kids to pledge and we equate patriotism with white capitalism. That's exactly what we do. How
yeah.
can they not? How can
Well,
they not be brainwashed if that's
when
everything you see?
when I was first running for office, Murray, I didn't realize that there are certain white conservative males that will eat up all of your time to prevent you from going out and talking to other people. I didn't realize that that was a thing because I was very naive when I ran. I mean, I ran like I do everything. It's like, well, that needs to be done. I'm going to take care of it. That's just how I always do things. And so I go to the farmer's market in Morris. Oh my gosh, I'm bringing up Morris, Illinois again. And I talked to a guy that owns a bakery. Now, I have to tell you, I got a cat from that man one time, and apparently there's cats in the bakery, which at the time didn't strike me as weird, but now strikes me as really gross because fur into your food. And the cat died of this horrible FIP illness. In fact, all of their cats ended up dying of it. And it was a horrible time. So I ran into him and we talked about the cat and then we talked about my political position. And he's like, well, I think you begrudge people that have money, like people like me that have some money. And I said, I really don't know how much money you have. And I don't begrudge you anything you have that you've worked for, that you've earned, that you inherited. I said, it's yours, not my prerogative. But why would you tax me more? I said, well, statistically, people who earn more use more resources. They leave a bigger carbon footprint. They use more infrastructure. Therefore, they should pay more and make it better for those at the other end of the spectrum that have less disposable to pay as taxes. And he said, you just are disgruntled because of your income. And I said, no, no, that's not it. But I didn't realize how much they like to eat up your time. But what he was telling me is that I wasn't honoring people that make money, wealthy people who are
Exactly,
comfortable.
exactly. And that plays into this patriotic capitalist myth that
Yeah,
if you're not making money, you're not successful.
right.
Even the way we pay our teachers, teachers are not respected in this. And I was thinking about that the other day. Maybe it's because they do a job where they have to go to work daily. Maybe that's why they have no respect. They're just considered workers. But if you think about it, educators are the ones that should be and are shaping our future. So they should really have
Yeah,
far more status in society than they do.
yeah. I,
So,
you
see,
know,
guys, the white man thing, go off. Just
well,
saying.
okay, so you know that I was born in 1960, and my parents always vacationed up in a little town called Minong in Wisconsin, and we went up to Minong every year and stayed on Little Sand Lake. And up on Little Sand Lake, most of the cabins around the lake were owned by school teachers from the Chicago area that made enough money that not only could they have a home in the Chicagoland area, but they also had a little rustic cabin on a lake where they spent the summer fishing because they didn't have to work a second job to just support themselves. So my and my I've got a lot of family members that are teachers, but they have um I don't know, Murray. What I was saying is, how could it be that somebody who had a really good paying job that was
Uh
considered a
oh.
valued member of society in the 60s, how could that possibly have changed that much? Thank you, Ronald Reagan. Sorry, because for me, everything goes back to the failures are in Reaganomics when it comes to
Oh,
that.
I know. Although it went back way farther than that in my mind.
It
But
did.
you're right.
It really did.
Reaganomics put us on a very steep roller coaster that descends into hell. Yeah,
Yeah.
he did a lot of really not so good things. Oh, we're hoping for the verdict, and it should be out any minute, folks. So, but in the event that we reach our time, we will have to leave you and pick it up on to Thursday as we.
As we try to see what happens today, I think that,
It should be
you know,
dropping any second.
yeah, we've discussed at length our opinions on inequality here in the United States. I feel like the entire world is holding its collective breath on this. And how many of these trials have we had? O.J. Simpson and Rodney King, and um, uh, those are the two that come to mind. But, you know, it feels like we're holding our breath again, just like those times. And will we see justice this time?
I
I
don't
don't know,
know.
Murray, what do you think?
I don't know, but whatever the answer, I have a feeling that it will. If violence erupts, if anger amounts, if we see an uptick in police violence or abuse of power, in any way, I am gonna say it will all come from the right, or I'm gonna say 89% of it will come from the right. Those
Well,
white male
didn't
uh,
we
Boogaloo
didn't we
Boys,
discover
Peacekeepers.
yeah, didn't we discover last year when everything got really bad in a couple of the big major cities, including Chicago, that it was organized crime from the Boogaloo Boys and the Oath Keepers?
Yep, and let's not forget that Antifa isn't real, so we can
Yeah.
throw that into their little mix. But also, let's remember that those people are crazy, okay, and they do not represent everyone else in the world. And we have to stop letting this tiny minority, and by minority, I mean white, rich, cis men, control our narrative. It's time to stop. That's what Auntie Maxine was saying.
Yeah, well, that's what Andy Maxine was saying, but I think that we also have to be aware that all of these subversive groups are also watching this with the idea of again causing distractions, because what they would do last time is if there was a gathering, a peaceful protest in one area, they would start a violent uh, window smashing someplace else, and then in the third area they would stage a robbery. Remember that,
Oh
Murray? Remember
yeah,
that? So that
absolutely. And
so
and
the
and they and just like just look back at our the Black Lives Matter protests after the death of George Floyd that occurred all across the country.
mhm.
Of those, the response to peaceful protests of hundreds of thousands of people was military might. And we
Mhm.
talk about white privilege, we talk about the class that you're in, and we had no support because of a
Yeah.
Trump rally where you knew there had been violence, where they had set things up. No, we need to pay attention. I'm sorry. It's killing me.
Well,
I'm waiting.
yeah. You know, I worry about the subversive violence again. And you know, some of the money that was used to fund the Capitol insurrection came from some of that looting and robbery um
It
that
did. The
happened.
looting and
Yeah.
robbery that they claim Black Lives
Yeah.
Matter supporters did. So don't believe what you
Right.
hear, guys. Remember, you're being gaslit. Maybe not brainwashed, but the effect of enough gaslighting is brainwashing. So perhaps you're only at the gaslit stage, but you are being lied to. And think about how you're being lied to, and it'll really start to make you mad.
So I just uh, thinking about that and looking forward to whatever happens this evening, either jubilant celebrations in the streets by people who feel vindicated, or protests by those that feel that they are not being heard. And could there be some police brutality from all of this? You see that, I don't see that. I see a change in policing coming up, but I think we're in two
I
different
I
camps on that.
see I see there has already been an increase in abuse of power by police since the beginning of 2020. It's become to the glaring forefront at the beginning of 2021. The incidents are up by 36% of video recorded incidents by police. So 36% has been an increase from last year and the year before, so what I'm saying is, I don't necessarily think, but remember, we have those white supremacists. We have those members who believe in the constitutional sheriff's organizations. Perhaps not directly, but they have the ability to terrorize anyone who stands up to them or anyone who's in a weaker position, and that's everyone but them. And that's a concern that those personal oath keepers who were at the insurrection, who stormed the Capitol, who were law enforcement detectives and officers, were there doing that. You tell me that those same people who aren't patrolling aren't going to be looking for any and every chance they can to bring that fury down on someone who's of color.
Well, but you are talking about a very small portion of law enforcement. I mean, most law enforcement are, do their work. They do a good job. They're not they aren't Derek Chauvins. They aren't the members of the three percenters. They aren't
You're
members
right.
of
Two
QAnon.
thirds of our police, sheriffs, state Department of Defense, and military, 2/3 are normal, sane, actually reasonable, caring people who want to do a good job and make things better. But there is that third, Heidi. And if we discount that third, we're ignoring a threat because we have seen it happen over and over. And I don't think it's going to get any better until we
Well,
change the
I'm
system,
hoping.
until there's fundamental
Well,
change.
there has to be an oversight board for all of this, and there has to be accountability. But we've seen it with, not enforcing mitigations for COVID-19. That some sheriff's departments only enforce the laws and rules that they believe in, and it's the same thing with policing, with who gets pulled over, who gets charged, and what they're charged with. The severity of that. So I
And
think
the
that
mayor of Kansas, oh, are they back?
no, it's a
I
space
want to bring up the
helicopter.
mayor of Kansas City for a minute. And Heidi, you just touched on
Yes,
something. When we did our
yeah.
candidate series, we talked to folks who were running for everything from coroner to county board to state's attorney.
It
And
was so cool.
we had an amazing woman on, Anna Wilhelmi, and she
Yeah.
was running for DeKalb County state's attorney. And her most compelling argument, which I just don't think either got enough voice or was understood, was that the district attorney, the state's attorney, has the ability to decide what is important to enforce, where the emphasis should go, how to help change the community. And that's what's
Hmm.
needed from that level down. And this mayor of Kansas City, his name is Quinton Jackson. He was on CNN today, and he was a very
He just had a
wise,
baby. Yeah, and he just
yes,
got
just got
married.
married.
So, yeah.
And he's a pretty fantastic guy, and he said they are reprioritizing what they're doing in Kansas City, Missouri. That it is upon not just our federal legislators and not just our uh, state legislators, but mayors, city council members can hold police accountable. Mayors
Right.
can, states attorneys can. All of
Hmm.
those tones can be changed when we change those people in those positions. So
I think
no,
I think
not
we
all
talk,
police are bad at all, but those that are, there's a
I,
third. That's a lot, and we need to fix it.
I think we talk about that a lot with governance and the flavor of every community. And we talk about how change starts with the library board. It starts with the soil and water conservation district. It starts with your county board. It starts with your elected school board. It starts at the very basic structure to make the systemic changes that must be made. It can't be a top down issue. This really has to be a grassroots bottom up issue where
But
everybody needs
nothing is
to.
done the right way. Nothing is done building a pyramid.
No.
Or nothing is done building. I guess stairs go both ways. I can't think of the image I'm thinking of. But
Well, you're
the
talking about
point
a
is,
pyramid you build
everything.
from the ground up,
Right, a
from
house.
not
Everything.
top down.
When you build anything, you have to have a foundation, right? And
Yeah.
that foundation depends on what your ground is like, whether it's sandy or sticky or sinky or
Right.
any number
Right.
of various things.
If you
But
don't
you
fix
have
the substrate, Marie, your building's going to topple. I have substrate issues with one of my buildings, and I'm having not toppling issues, but timber cracking issues.
So, guys,
It's
we
a
did not get the
substrate.
verdict, but we will get the verdict on Tuesday, or we will have the
Thursday.
verdict today, and we will tweet, Facebook, and be on Thursday to talk a little bit more about it and the consequences that it's gonna whatever happens. So tune in on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can catch all of our past episodes on YouTube, Facebook, anywhere you get your favorite podcasts. We also have a show called Heartland Mamas Unrolled that is on independent radio. So please like, subscribe, share so that your voice can be heard. Thanks again for tuning in. Heartland Mamas.
MAMAS. See you later, everybody. Take care now. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.
Bye bye.